Let's move on to the next question. So the next question says, what are the major features of monopolistic competition compared to pure competition and pure monopoly? Okay. So we went over this a little bit in the first question today, but again, monopolistic competition is somewhere in between pure competition and pure monopoly. It takes on traits of both industries. In pure competition, what you will find, in monopolistic competition, we'll find it just like in pure competition. You'll see a large number of producers, right? And this is different than monopoly, where there's only one producer. So in monopolistic competition, just like in pure competition, we have a large number of producers, but instead of all these producers producing the exact same product, in monopolistic competition, we have slightly differentiated products. So we don't have identical substitutes or perfect substitutes between suppliers. We have close substitutes. And so this leads to a lot more variety for the consumer to choose from, and this is what we call product differentiation. And so, unlike in monopoly, where there's a lot of high barriers to entry and exit, maybe very, very high upfront fixed costs or something like that. In monopolistic competition, just like in pure competition, we find that firms have very low barriers to entry and exit, that firms who want to enter the market can enter with very little barriers, and firms who want to exit the market are not prevented from doing that. And so that's going to be another major feature of monopolistic competition. And finally, the type of competition that monopolistic competitive markets have is sometimes lends itself to what we would describe as non-price competition. So you're no longer trying to win customers off the price, having a better price than your suppliers, but by having some sort of better marketing campaign or some sort of better advertising or some feature that maybe your other competitors don't have. And so, a minor feature. And so these are some of the major features of monopolistic competition compared to pure competition and pure monopoly. So I'm going to read the previous tutor's answer. If I recall correctly, it's very, very long, but I'll read all of it just to get all the information out there for you guys, and we can maybe critique some of the things that the previous tutor said. This is a fairly open-ended question, and I think I touched on the major points, but we can see what the more in-depth explanation from this tutor looks like. So, this tutor said, get some water. This tutor said, for monopolistic competition, it's a market structure characterized by a large number of small firms, similar but not identical products sold by all firms, relative freedom of entry and exit out of the industry, and extensive knowledges of price and technology. This is one of 4 basic market structures. The other 3 are perfect competition, monopoly, and oligopoly. Monopolistic competition approximates most of the characteristics of perfect competition, but falls short of reaching the ideal benchmark that it is perfect competition. It is the best approximation of perfect competition that the real world offers. That's true. Monopolistic competition is a market structure characterized by a large number of relatively small firms. While the goods produced by the firms in the industry are similar, slight differences often exist. As such, firms operating in monopolistic competition are extremely competitive, but each has a small degree of market control. That's true. In effect, monopolistic competition is something of a hybrid between perfect competition and monopoly. Comparable to perfect competition, monopolistic competition contains a large number of extremely competitive firms. However, comparable to monopoly, each firm has market control and faces a negatively sloped demand curve. The real world is widely populated by monopolistic competition. Perhaps half the economy's total production comes from monopolistically competitive firms. I don't know where that number came from, but maybe that's true. The best examples of monopolistic competition come from retail, including restaurants, clothing stores, and convenience stores. That's true. The 4 characteristics of monopolistic competition are: number 1, a large number of small firms; number 2, similar but not identical products; number 3, relatively good but not perfect resource mobility; and number 4, extensive but not perfect knowledge. For a large number of small firms, A monopolistically competitive industry contains a large number of small firms, each of which is relatively small compared to the overall size of the market. This ensures that all firms are relatively competitive for very little market control over price or quantity. In particular, each firm has hundreds or even thousands of potential competitors. Yeah, so that's different than monopoly, where you have no competition at all, and you have very strong centralized market control. Number 2, similar products. Each firm in a monopolistically competitive market sells a similar but not absolutely identical product. The goods sold by the firms are close substitutes for one another, just not perfect substitutes. Most importantly, each good satisfies the same basic want or need. Goods might have subtle but actual physical differences, or they might only be perceived as different by the buyers, whether the reason buyer treats the goods as similar but not different. Similar but different. That's true. 3, relative resource mobility. Monopolistically competitive firms are relatively free to enter and exit the industry. There might be a few restrictions, but not many. These firms are not perfectly mobile as perfect competition, but they are largely unrestricted by government rules and regulations, startup costs, or other substantial barriers to entry. 4, extensive knowledge in monopolistic competition. Buyers do not know everything, but they have relatively complete information about alternative prices. They also have relatively complete information about product differences, brand names, etc. Each seller also has a relatively complete information about production techniques and the prices charged by their competitors. Product differentiation. The goods produced by firms operating in a monopolistically competitive market are subject to product differentiation. The goods are essentially the same, but they have slight differences. Product differentiation, wow, this is very in-depth, is usually achieved in one of 3 ways. Number 1, physical differences. Number 2, perceived differences. And number 3, support services. Number 1, physical differences. In some cases, the product of one firm is physically different from the product of another firm. One good is chocolate and another is vanilla. One good uses plastic, the other aluminum. Number 2, perceived differences. In other cases, goods are only perceived to be different by the buyers, even though no physical differences exist. Such differences are often created by brand names, where the only difference is packaging. Number 3, support services. In still other cases, products that are physically identical are perceived to be identical are differentiated by support services. Even though the products purchased are identical, one retail might offer service with a smile, while another provides express checkout. Product differentiation is the main or primary reason that each firm operating in a monopolistically competitive market is able to create a little monopoly all to itself. Alright, what else is going on here? Demand and revenue, demand curve, monopolistic competition, monopolistically competition, demand. The 4 characteristics of monopolistic competition mean that a monopolistic competitive firm faces a relatively elastic but not perfectly elastic demand curve, such as the one displayed in the exhibit to the right. I don't think that was actually attached here. Each firm in a monopolistic competitive market can sell a wide range of output within a relatively narrow range of prices. Demand is relatively elastic. Let me see. Demand is relatively elastic in monopolistic competition because each firm faces competition from a large number of very, very close substitutes. This is true. However, demand is not perfectly elastic as it is in perfect competition because the output of each firm is slightly different from that of other firms. Monopolistically competitive goods are close substitutes but not perfect substitutes. Exhibit to the right. Okay, so I think this is an example given by a graph that we don't have, so we won't go into that. A monopolistically competitive firm is a price maker with some degree of control over price. Once again, unlike perfect competition, a monopolistically competitive firm has the ability to raise or lower the price a little, not much, but a little. And like monopoly, the price received by a monopolistically competitive firm, which is also the firm's average revenue, is greater than its marginal revenue. The analysis of short-order production by a monopolistically competitive firm provides insight into market supply. A key assumption is that a monopolistically competitive firm, like any other firm, is motivated by profit maximization. The firm chooses to produce a quantity of output that generates the highest possible level of profit, given price, market demand, cost conditions, production technology, etc. In the short run, and this is also talking about a graph that we don't have. In the long run, of all inputs variable, a monopolistically competitive industry reaches equilibrium at an output that generates economies of scale or increasing returns to scale. At this level of output, the negatively sloped demand curve is tangent to a negatively sloped segment of the long-run average cost curve. This is achieved through a two-fold adjustment process. The first of the folds is entry and exit out of firms in and out of the market. of industry. This ensures that firms earn zero economic profit and that price equal to average cost. That's true. The second of the folds is the pursuit of profit maximization by each firm in the industry. This ensures that firms produce a quantity of output that equates marginal revenue with short-run and long-run marginal costs. Because a monopolistic competitive firm has some market control and faces a negatively sloped demand curve, the end result of this long-run adjustment has two equilibrium conditions. One is marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost is equal to long-run marginal cost, and two is that price is equal to average revenue, which is equal to average total cost and equal to long-run average cost. With marginal revenue equal to marginal cost, each firm is maximizing profit and has no reason to adjust the quantity of output or factory size. With price equal to average cost, each firm in the industry is earning only a normal profit. Economic profit is zero and there are no economic losses, meaning no firm is inclined to enter or exit the industry. These conditions are satisfied separately. However, price is not equal. Because price is not equal to marginal revenue, the two equations are not equal. Unlike in perfect competition, this further means that monopolistic competition does not achieve long-run equilibrium at the minimum efficient scale of production. Real-world efficiency. A monopolistically competitive firm generally produces less output and charges a higher price than would be the case for a perfectly competitive industry. In particular, the price charged by a monopolistically competitive firm is greater than its marginal cost. The inequality of price and marginal cost violates the key condition of efficiency. Resources are not being used to generate the highest possible level of satisfaction. The reason for this inefficiency is found with market control. Because a monopolistically competitive firm has control over a small slice of the market, it faces a negatively sloped demand curve, and price is greater than marginal revenue, which is set equal to marginal cost when maximizing profit. While monopolistic competition is technically inefficient, it tends to be less inefficient than other market structures, especially monopoly, even though price is greater than marginal revenue. Because of the demand curve is relatively elastic, the difference is often relatively small. This is all true. It talks about market control, and whenever you have market control, you have inefficient outcome. And so then it talks about the other market structures, and we don't have to get into that too much, but basically perfect competition, monopoly, and oligopoly are other three market structures. Great in-depth explanation, nothing wrong there. It's really good for anybody who wants a really good primer on monopolistic competition, and we're going to mark that as correct.